The question is that this bill be now read a second time. The member for Hughes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Infrastructure Australia Bill 2008 is of particular interest to the people of my electorate of Hughes because of two key infrastructure proposals which are of concern to my residents, namely the long overdue F6 corridor through Sutherland and the more recent suggestion of a large intermodal freight hub at Moorebank. Hence, I am pleased to be able to speak on this bill. The Infrastructure Australia Bill's purpose is to establish an entity, Infrastructure Australia, to advise all levels of government, investors and infrastructure owners on matters relating to the provision of infrastructure across Australia. This advisory body will undertake a national infrastructure audit and develop a set of guidelines to replace those currently used by the governments of each state and Commonwealth. To make this legislation as effective as possible on a national level, I respectfully contend that the federal government give favourable consideration to the amendments which will be proposed by the Coalition. These amendments will ensure that the new infrastructure authority created by this bill will not simply be another useless entity to excuse state Labor's failure to act on infrastructure planning and development. It is feared by many that this proposed advisory authority could take years to develop a list of priorities and take further years to make any contribution to improving national infrastructure. The Coalition will move 3 technical amendments which will address the lifting of restrictions upon Infrastructure Australia to allow it to undertake reviews under its own volition, to make the Minister's power to give new functions subject to parliamentary scrutiny, and to ensure that the Minister seeks advice from Infrastructure Australia before appointing the Infrastructure Coordinator to reduce the temptation to appoint a special mate to this important post. With great optimism, I therefore wish to bring a number of local issues to the attention of the House to support the argument that the proposed authority needs to be a body that will not simply continue Labor's appalling record of neglect and indifference at state and territory level on the planning and construction of major roads and rail. These continue to create bottlenecks in and around our capital cities. For instance, past infrastructure debacles instigated by the New South Wales State Labor Government include the Cross City Tunnel, the Lane Cove Tunnel and the Kurnell desalination plant, to name a few in our Sydney region. At a local level, the most important infrastructure proposal that concerns those of my constituents in the Sutherland Shire area of my electorate is the long-delayed extension of the F6 corridor from Loftus to Captain Cook Bridge and Tarrant Point. Around 2,500 motor vehicles and freight vehicles travel daily through the Sutherland Shire from the Wollongong and Illawarra region to Sydney and also to return again. The traffic congestion on the Princes Highway and the other important arterial roads in the Shire is monumental and the greatest cause of frustration to all road users. The stopping and starting at the many traffic lights, indeed in the long lanes of traffic on the highway, adds to the greenhouse gas emissions, but more importantly is an issue of road safety for local residents. In Heathcote alone, there have been 4 deaths on the Princes Highway in the past 3 years due to intense traffic use, one being a small boy on his bike at the lights at Heathcote. The corridor extension of the F6 has been planned since the early 1950s. Indeed, when my husband and I purchased our home near President Avenue in Gymea, one of the major arterial roads of the Shire, we were advised that the F6 would be built in the next 10 years, just a few blocks away. That was in 1965, and I and the rest of Sutherland Shire are still waiting for this vital modern improvement to the 1950s road system that currently exists in the area. The extension of the F6 through the Sutherland Shire is now critical. My constituents are sick of wasting precious time sitting in the traffic for hours on end each and every day of the week. We need a properly planned F6 corridor to provide the modern roadway that people in modern Australia have come to expect. Better road infrastructure means less time on our roads for local families, but also less pollution, and this roadway is decades overdue. Without the F6 corridor, the future is grim for Shire residents travelling to the city. The future will bring more of the same, but increasingly worse. With the expansion of the port facility at Port Kembla and the exponential growth in the Illawarra region, it is expected that several hundred trucks alone will be added to the roadways of my electorate in the next few years. That means around 200,000 trucks per year, increasing wear and tear on our 1950s roadways, making them even more dangerous. The F6 corridor would create a safe, direct route for all motorists. It would mean fewer large trucks on our local roadways and safer conditions for pedestrians and the families of my electorate. At the last election, the Coalition Government committed $20 million for the New South Wales State Government to undertake planning and preliminary works for the proposed F6 corridor. In the interests and safety of all road users of the Princes Highway from Wollongong through Sutherland Shire to the city, it is vital that this current government confirm and follow through on this commitment that was ardently supported by myself and the member for Cook, Mr Scott Morrison, on behalf of the people of our electorates during the 2007 election campaign. This promise of $20 million represented great hope for the many road users who use the roadway, not only the people of Wollongong, but especially the residents of our electorates. After nearly 60 years on the planning table, this is vital infrastructure that is well and truly overdue. The new advisory authority, Infrastructure Australia, could not be more welcome if it delivers on its promise. The $20 million announcement by the previous coalition government was part of the 2020 Plan for Australia's Transport Future, an integrated vision tackling local roads and national highways, much needed by local residents as well as interstate long-haul freight vehicles. The need for the F6 corridor is also a key priority identified in a survey conducted by the NRMA, which reflected the widespread community concern about the urgent need for this road link.